Today we are going to explore bird beaks. You might be wondering, why do different birds have different types of beaks? Well, it depends on what type of food they eat. So in this activity, we will act as scientists who explore a question and investigate how bird beaks are adapted to help them gather their food. So do you know what a scientist is? Well, a scientist is a person who asks questions, they make observations, and they investigate ideas to gain knowledge or to solve a problem. We are going to be acting like scientists today. You will use the scientific inquiry process. That's this right here. We are going to ask ourselves a question, which we already did. We're going to make a prediction. Then we will investigate, observe, and explain. So today we're just going to start with the ask and the predict. Let's take a look at this video about the scientific inquiry process.
Welcome, scientist. How'd I know you were a scientist? Well, you may not be wearing a white lab coat, but lots of scientists don't. I know you are a scientist because you ask meaningful questions, and that's exactly what scientists do. Scientists wonder why things happen in the natural world, and then try to find out more. Have you ever wondered why certain things happen? You can use the scientific inquiry process to learn more about the natural world. The scientific inquiry process is a step-by-step method that scientists use to gather information about the world around us. When scientists follow this process, they work through steps that require them to ask, predict, investigate, observe, and explain. The first step in the scientific inquiry process is ask. When you ask a question, it's important to develop the question in a way that makes it testable. Testable questions are those you answer as you conduct investigations and make observations that provide evidence. A testable question should focus on the natural world, such as an object, organism, or event. It focuses on the scientific concept rather than your personal opinion or feelings. It can be answered through experiments or observations, and guides you to use the evidence and data you gathered from the investigation to explain your findings. Once you've developed a testable question, you're ready to make a prediction. In the predict stage of the scientific inquiry process, you use your past experiences to suggest an answer to your question and explain your thinking. The next step is to investigate. It's time to set up your experiment to test your question. You need to consider what materials you should use and how you'll measure and collect data. In the observe step of the scientific inquiry process, you conduct your investigation, make observations about what's happening in your experiment, and record or document your findings. In the next step, you'll use this data as evidence. The last step of the scientific inquiry process is explain. This is when you share what you've learned. Be sure to explain the data, evidence, and observations you recorded earlier. It's important to use evidence as you explain because people will ask, how do you know that? And what evidence do you have? It's likely that you will have questions even after you've conducted your investigation. After scientists conduct an investigation, they continue to ask questions. This leads to another cycle through the inquiry process. The scientific inquiry process is an ongoing process. Sometimes you need to go back to the previous step before you move on. This process is a step-by-step way to learn more about something you're curious about. When you have questions about the natural world, use these steps to grow your understanding. Ask, predict, investigate, observe, and explain.
Like I said, we are going to be using the ask and predict stages today. We are going to start by asking. And our ask is, which beak is best adapted to collect flower nectar, a grub, or a fish? Let's take a look at the different birds who might collect flower nectar a grub, or a fish? Here we have a pelican. And you'll need to think about this bird's beak. What might this bird be good at collecting? What is its beak adapted to collect? We also have the hummingbird. Again, you'll want to look at this bird's beak. What might this beak be good at collecting? A grub, nectar, or a fish? And finally, we're going to look at a woodpecker. And let's look at a bird's beak. What would this beak be good at collecting? Is it adapted to get nectar, a grub, or a fish? You will make your predictions on Seesaw, and then we will talk about them more tomorrow.